السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. إن شاء الله تعالى we'll continue with Surah As-Saaffat, and we'll go through verses 20 to 26 inshallah. 20 to 26. So Surah As-Saaffat, open the Mus'haf inshallah, and we'll start with the recitation. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. وقالوا يا ويلنا هذا يوم الدين. هذا يوم الفصل الذي كنتم به تكذبون. احشروا الذين ظلموا وأزواجهم وما كانوا يعبدون. من دون الله فاهدوهم إلى صراط الجحيم. وقفوهم إنهم مسؤولون. ما لكم لا تناصرون. بل هم اليوم مستسلمون. وقالوا يا ويلنا هذا يوم الدين. هذا يوم الفصل الذي الفصل the fa is light and the sad is heavy. هذا يوم الفا. هذا يوم الفصل. هذا يوم الفصل الذي إخفاء الذي another إخفاء afterwards الذي كنتم به تكذبون. احشروا الذين احشروا with a ضمة because the third letter has a ضمة. احشروا الذين ظلموا وأزواجهم وما كانوا يعبدون من إخفاء من دون الله فاهدوهم إلى صراط الجحيم. صاد is heavy. وقفوهم إنهم نون الشدة 2 counts and then إدغام 2 memes إنهم مسؤولون. ما لكم لا تناصرون. light and then the صاد is heavy. تناصرون. بل هم اليوم مستسلمون. So the verse is continuing about those who disbelieved in the day of judgment, when they will be humiliated in the day of judgment, and they would say وقالوا يا ويلنا هذا يوم الدين. They will say, woe to us, this is the day of recompense. You can imagine the shock, the horror, all kinds of evil and the worst feelings, physically and non-physical, to these people. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from disbelief. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from being resurrected and gathered with the disbelievers. So this is how their affair is going to be in the day of judgment. And they would say, وَقَالُوا, and they would say, يَا وَيْلَنَا, woe to us, هَذَا يَوْمُ الدِّينِ, this is the day of ad-din. This is the day of recompense. But it's too late for them to believe it only when they witnessed it. This is the difference between the believers versus the disbelievers. The disbelievers لا يؤمنون به حتى يروا العذاب الأليم. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, they won't believe in it till they see the painful punishment. But what's the word believe does not exist then. You don't say I believe when you're looking at the thing that you believe in. Believe requires to be unseen. So they would acknowledge how evil they were when they see the horrors of the Day of Judgment, and they would regret so much, but again, no benefit there for them. وقالوا يا ويلنا هذا يوم الدين هذا يوم الفصل هذا يوم الفصل الذي كنتم به تكذبون. This is the day of al-fasl, the day of judgment, which you used to deny. The angels would say that to them, the believers would say that to them, it will be said that to them. هذا يوم الفصل الذي كنتم به تكذبون. This is that is to be said to them in a way to scold them, to make them even feel worse and worse. That this is the day of al-fasl. This is the day of judgment. Al-fasl is when things are separated. Things are made distinct. It is not ambiguous like it might seem to be in this world. Things will become very clear. And actually, as is always mentioned, remember that when things will be in the day of judgment so clear, وَامْتَازُوا الْيَوْمَ أَيُّهَا الْمُجْرِمُونَ, be separated, O people of all the criminals or so, and فَرِيقٌ فِي الْجَنَّةِ وَفَرِيقٌ فِي السَّعِيرِ, group in Jannah and group is in hellfire. How clearly different is the hellfire from the Jannah, and the people of Jannah are completely different than the people of the hellfire. Completely different in the hereafter only, no, in this world. They're completely different, and that's why one is taking the path to Jannah and one is taking the path to the hellfire. They cannot look the same with their belief in their hearts, with their actions, with everything. So one of the characteristics of the Day of Judgment, that it's Yawm al-Fasl, where the haqq is separated from the falsehood, and therefore the judgment will be made very clear by the most just Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. هذا يوم الفصل الذي كنتم به تكذبون, that you used to deny. احشروا الذين ظلموا وأزواجهم وما كانوا يعبدون. It will be said to the angels, assemble those who did wrong together with their companions from the devils and what they used to worship. احشروا الذين ظلموا. احشروا, gather from al-hashr, those who wrong themselves. الذين ظلموا, those who wrong themselves. وأزواجهم. أزواجهم is basically the like of them, not necessarily their wives or their spouses. Az-zawj is what a person is not alone with, someone that is companion, someone the like of them. So not necessarily if a person had a wife that is a believer or vice versa, they're not going to be resurrected with them. So as Umar radiallahu anhu and others, they said, like وأزواجهم, he said أشبههم, the like of them. He says يجيء صاحب الربا مع أصحاب الربا. The person of riba, the person that used to deal with usury, he will come in the Day of Judgment with the people that dealt with usury. You know, all the different criminal acts, they will be together. صاحب الزنا مع أصحاب الزنا. The fornicator with the fornicators. صاحب الخمر مع أصحاب الخمر. The one that used to drink khamr and wine and intoxications, he will be resurrected with them. Like this. And of course, أزواجهم, it can be the spouses if the spouses are upon the same religion. So if they are together on the same evil, they will be also together. So, but what it means here, احشروا الذين ظلموا وأزواجهم, bring those who wrong themselves and the like of them, those who committed the same act. And it's also, as you see, this is in the Day of Judgment. Every time something is mentioned in the Day of Judgment, we need to see what is in this life, in our time, now, what to do to protect ourselves from what is being mentioned as a punishment, or to do whatever good deed that we hear about in the Day of Judgment there is a reward for. So to stay away from sins and to stay away from associating oneself with those who committed these types of sins, and to remember people will be resurrected together, the like, you know, those who are like to one another, they will be resurrected, the believers together, the disbelievers together, the sinners, and things like this. احشروا الذين ظلموا وأزواجهم وما كانوا يعبدون, and what they used to worship besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, idols and things like this. And the shayateen those who led them astray. And of course, if they worshipped someone that is righteous or a prophet of Allah, they won't be resurrected with them. But the shayateen, those who led them astray. احشروا الذين ظلموا أزواجهم وما كانوا يعبدون من دون الله فهدوهم إلى صراط الجحيم. Besides Allah, those who they worship besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and lead them on the way of flaming fire. من دون الله, besides Allah. فهدوهم, guide them, take them إلى صراط الجحيم, to the path of the fire. So it will be said to them, take them, and that's hidayah, guidance, meaning when you guide someone physically to go to a place, to take them to a place. ونحشرهم يوم القيامة على وجوههم عميا وبكما وصما. As Ibn Kathir rahimahullah quoted the ayah in Surah Al-Isra, that we will gather them in the day of Al-Qiyamah on their faces, blind, deaf, and dumb. مأواهم جهنم, their place, their abode is Jahannam. كلما خبت زدناهم سعيرا. Every time the fire becomes less, we increase it. So all of them will be gathered in the day of judgment, the people, the like of them, things that they worship besides Allah. فهدوهم إلى صراط الجحيم, take them fiercely to جهنم والعياذ بالله. وقفوهم إنهم مسؤولون. وقفوهم, but stop them, verily they are to be questioned. وقفوهم إنهم مسؤولون, which means stop them so that they're asked about their actions and their speech, so that it makes them even more and more in regret and misery, to remind them of their evil actions. It's like when the judge read on to the criminal his actions before he's executed or so. So everybody that does anything, they will be stopped in the day of judgment to get themselves free from what they've earned of evil. That's why it's the importance of tawbah and repenting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before the day of judgment. وقفوهم, and stop them even before you go throw them to the hellfire, before they're thrown into the fire, because they will be of what they did in this dunya, in this world, and for them to be exposed in front of all of the humanity before they're thrown into the fire, for people to see the justice of Allah. And as mentioned before, that those who will be thrown into the hellfire, they would curse themselves and they would see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most just. And it will be said to them, as mentioned in Surah Yasin, أَلَمْ أَعْهَدْ إِلَيْكُمْ يَا بَنِي آدَمَ, didn't I take the covenant from you, O sons of Adam, not to worship the shaitan? أَلَمْ يَأْتِكُمْ رُسُلٌ مِّنْكُمْ, did messengers came from among you to establish the evidence upon you? They will be asked about what? Be asked about La ilaha illallah, as Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he said. They will be asked about the dhulm, the injustices that they committed, the disbelievers. They will be asked about the Quran. How did they follow the Quran? وَإِنَّهُ لَذِكْرٌ لَكَ وَلِقَوْمِكَ وَسَوْفَ تُسْأَلُونَ, that this is a mention of you and your people, and you will be questioned. وَقِفُوهُمْ إِنَّهُمْ مَسْئُولُونَ. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, كُلُّكُمْ رَاعٍ وَكُلُّكُمْ مَسْئُولٌ عَنْ رَعِيَّتِهِ. Each one of you is ra'in, a shepherd, has dependencies, and everybody will be asked about his dependencies. So we will be asked, and that's why here with the disbelievers, they will be asked to for them to speak and to say how the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is for them to be thrown into the hellfire. And as we know from before, questioning to answer, that means a person will be punished. But if someone is being reminded of their sins without being asked to answer, for the believers, this is they will be forgiven and they will enter the Jannah of Allah, as mentioned in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. مَا لَكُمْ لَا تَنَاصَرُونَ. Then it will be said, what's the matter with you? Why do you not help one another? Meaning, as the way that you used to do in this world. And that's also something to be said to them to make them even feel worse and worse. You know, and Ibn Kathir rahimahullah, he mentioned here that Uthman ibn Zaidah, he said, إِنَّ أَوَّلَ مَا يُسْأَلُ عَنْهُ الرَّجُلُ جُلَسَاءُ. One of the first things that a person will be asked about in the Day of Judgment is those who used to associate himself with, those who used to sit with. Then it will be said to them in a way to scold them, مَا لَكُمْ لَا تَنَاصَرُونَ. Why you're not helping one another? Why can't you support one another? You claimed, or you used to protect one another in this world, to defend yourself, to support yourself. But now on the day of judgment, what happened to you? There's nothing whatsoever. You cannot benefit one another. You cannot save one another. It's your own actions. So again, it's a reminder for those who seek protection or seek help in this world against one another, that would all these relationships will be severed. It would not have any effect whatsoever, and every person will come in the day of judgment with his own actions. Nobody can help one another. A son cannot help his father or mother. A mother cannot help her son or daughter. Nobody can help anyone. Dependencies, those who they defended one another, the person had army to defend them, they will disloyal one another, from one another. And it's so many different verses in the Quran that talks about this. ما لكم لا تناصرون بل هم اليوم مستسلمون. Rather, today they are مستسلمون. They are in state of submission to the commands of Allah. They cannot say anything without permission. They cannot defend themselves. They are in state of full submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you see how these words and how that, in this world again, they will be in state of submission in the day of judgment. We need to be in state of submission willingly in this life, to submit ourselves to the commands of Allah, because those who claim that they're not in state of submission, or you think, or you might look at someone follows their desires in this world, and people might be deceived by the way they're following their desires. Human beings, they like to, fulfill their desires. So, but then remember that if they follow their desires and they do not submit themselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this life willingly, they will be forced to submit. But submit what? Submit themselves to the punishment in the hellfire. They cannot protect themselves. They cannot run away from the punishment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prepared for them. So as we see here, then the verses وقالوا, going back to the words وقالوا يا ويلنا هذا يوم الدين. يا ويلنا, ويل, ya is woe, calling, and al-wayl is the destruction, is a valley in Jahannam. And it's a word to be said when a person is in so much state of sorrow and regret. So they would say, Ya waylana hadha yawmuddin. This is the day of ad-din, and ad-din is recompense. Maliki yawmuddin, the day of recompense, judgment, where people will be recompensed for their actions. And then they would say, this is what they would say in the day of judgment. هذا, this is يوم الفصل, the day of fasl or judgment. Al-fasl is the separation, as we said, from the same three letters. And that's the same word is used for chapters. Fasl kada in the books. Fasl, because it's a separation between what's previously mentioned versus what is mentioned now. And when two things are separated, are made very clear. وَكُلَّ شَيْءٍ فَصَّلْنَاهُ تَفْصِيلًا. The Quran explains things in details. And this is the same word is used for things that are mentioned in details, right? And separation. Weaning a child is called fisal. وَفِصَالُهُ فِي عَامَيْنِ. To wean a child, to separate them from being fully dependent on the breastfeeding from his mother, for example. وَلَمَّا فَصَلَتِ الْعِيرُ, and so on. So al-fasl is the separation between truth and falsehood, and things like this. الذي كنتم به, what you used to, الذي كنتم به تكذبون, from كاف ذال باء, that used to deny, from الكذب or lying. احشروا, this is a command from حاء شين راء, which means gathering people. And it's more of when you, al-hashr is when you bring a group of people from their place in a forceful way. وَإِذَا الْوُحُوشُ حُشِرَتْ, and things like this. So this is the gathering in the day of judgment according to how things will be, as explained in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. وَحْشُرُوا الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا, those who wronged themselves, from ظَلَمَ, وَأَزْوَاجَهُم, and their kinds, from زَوْج, the like of them, their spouses, if they're upon the evil actions like them. وَمَا, and what they used to, كَانُوا يَعْبُدُونَ, worship, from عين باء دال. من دون الله, besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, من دون الله. فَهْدُوهُم, so guide them. Uhdu, as is a command. The waw here refers to the group of people, and hum, they. So it will be said to the angels, guide them, take them, lead them to, and of course they are led with humiliation, as mentioned in other verses in the Quran, إلى صراط, and the صراط from صاد راء, the path of al-jahim, of the jahim, or the hellfire, from jim ha mim. This refers to the intense part of the fire. وَقِفُوهُمْ, and make them stop. So it will be said also to the angels, and make them stop, from qif, waqafa, to stand or to stop. إِنَّهُمْ مَسْئُولُونَ, indeed they are to be questioned. مَسْئُولُونَ, from sa'ala. By the way, in the way that people explain, or nowadays, with they call the one in charge of something, because he's mas'ul, he's going to be questioned about his position. They call him mas'ul, someone in a position. They always refer to the people in the government and things like this. They say al-mas'ulun, because they are responsible, they are to be questioned. ما لكم, what's the matter with you? لا, you do not تناصرون, from nasara. You're not giving victory to one another. You're not helping, aiding one another. And that's, of course, إِنَّا نَنْصُرُ رُسُلَنَا, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give victory to the messengers. بَلْ هُمُ الْيَوْمَ مُسْتَسْلِمُونَ, but rather they are هُمُ الْيَوْم, they are today. And hum and yawm, hada, all of these things is to stress these meanings, to bring it as if we're seeing what's happening on the Day of Judgment. Al-Yawm, on the Day of Judgment, mustaslimun, surrendering, instead of surrendering to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from seeing lam mim. And that's, mustaslimun, because it's in the plural tense. So as we see here, the ayat that talks about the Day of Judgment, and what's going to be the affairs of the disbelievers. So for the disbelievers to be warned, for the believers not to be deceived by the ways of the disbeliever. When you see someone, or when you think of the disbelievers, what comes into your heart? Does it come to your heart that, oh, they're well established, they have so much money, they have so much power, things like this? Or it comes into your heart that you wish they can save themselves from the hellfire? You see how miserable state that they're in when they're in state of disbelief. They're disbelieving in Allah. They're living their life without worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, living their life without following what's halal and to stay away from what's haram. What kind of life is this? How miserable life that is. Why? Because you read the ayat of the Quran that talks about the hereafter. Things are to be treated or dealt with of how the outcome and the end of things are. Again, as we mentioned, this is the way to purify ourselves. This is the way to purify our hearts, and to even increase our wisdom and intellect, is to look at things at the end. No one would see someone took a poison, but it makes him feel good. You won't say, oh, I would love to be in the same feel of enjoyment that he has. If you know that this poison that he takes makes him feel good, but then after a few hours, for example, he will die or so, you won't be so much trapped into the feeling that he has now. Look at the end of things. And it doesn't matter if the end of things is in few hours or few days or few years or after a century from now. It doesn't matter. It's coming. So this is a great benefit to always think like this. And that's why reading the ayat in the salah, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for Jannah, seeking refuge in Allah from hellfire, reminding ourselves to stay away from liking what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala condemned here in the Quran. This is how their affairs will be. And the different characteristics of the Day of Judgment. It's the Day of Judgment. It's a day of separation, and how the actions should be separated in this life. And the belief in the hereafter, and to be upon truthfulness, and not to be in ambiguity with it. We should not say this is what's going to happen in the Day of Judgment, then if it's something evil and the outcome of evil, then we do it in this life. We have to be very clear and not ambiguous, and not to try to think that we can do both in a good way. The hashr, the gathering, the evil of wrongdoing, people will be resurrected together. So who are we associating ourselves with in this life? It doesn't have to be physical association only. It can be also with actions. So the evil people will be categorized according to their actions. and the evil of shirk, worshipping other than Allah. People will be questioned in the day of judgment, and the questioning either to be waiting for an answer or not waiting for an answer, and it's for the disbelievers is a punishment by itself, and for the believers it's to show the favor of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon them. Also, it shows that seeking help and seeking victory in this life based on what? And how that is going to have an effect in the day of judgment. And the importance of submitting ourselves willingly in this life before everyone will be in state of submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. See how life, these signs and ayat around us, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from all evil and have mercy upon those who suffer, and the Muslims, those who face these earthquakes. We need to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness for those who died, and this is martyrdom for those who die under destruction of buildings and so on. And at the same time, it's a reminder for this ummah. And as Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, when one time the earthquake was happened, and he said that in the meaning of which that this is something that your Lord Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ta'tibukum, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is it's when you blame someone of something, and that means before it's too late. That means repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't fall into this forgetfulness where people say that this is a normal thing in the life on earth and so on. Yes, there's so many different normal things that it's all by the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and things happens for a reason, and the reasons are there. This obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so that means we have to be warned. So these are from the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we have in the Quran the sufficient warning. So to repent to Allah, to be steadfast upon the deen of Allah, to be warned against anything that is associating partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sins, to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with dua, to make dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to make istighfar, and also to help those who are needy, those who are in need. And this is a way for people to help one another with their wealth, with their means of supporting one another. Umar radiallahu anhu, when the earth shaken at his time, he said, هذه الزلزلة إلا عن شيء أحدثتموه. It's something that you did. And because of that, they're always referring to ourselves to repent to Allah and to be steadfast upon the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we cannot deny that how much evil that is being widespread, and how it's our fault. We need to repent to Allah. We need to call others to be upon what is righteousness, instead of just looking at others of how faults they have. No, we should look at ourselves first, to repent to Allah and to do what is good and to be steadfast upon the deen of Allah. So we'll stop here, inshallah ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept and make us among the people of the Quran, inshallah. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam, baraka Muhammad wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.